She poured nearly $140,000 into a resort-style swimming pool on property that never belonged to her. She brushed off every warning, dismissed every concern, and actually laughed when I informed her she had 30 days to remove it. Less than 24 hours later, that luxury pool was serving a very different purpose. Instead of hosting cocktail parties, it was supplying water to 300 cattle grazing on my ranch, and every gallon being used was completely legal. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I'm curious to see how far this story travels, because what this woman did is unbelievable no matter what country you're in. My name is Garrett, and before we go any further, there's something important you need to understand. I'm not a homeowner arguing over property markers in a suburban neighborhood. I'm not dealing with parking disputes or landscaping complaints. I operate a working cattle ranch that has been passed down through 4 generations of my family. My grandfather cleared this land himself. He started with little more than a mule, determination, and an official boundary survey that he carried folded inside his shirt pocket for decades. That survey became one of the most important documents in our family. It never disappeared, never got misplaced, and never left our possession. The ranch covers 412 acres. Every section has been surveyed, documented, recorded, and legally established with the county long before most of the people involved in this story were even born. We raise cattle, primarily Angus crosses, and depending on the time of year, we run around 300 head. This isn't decorative countryside. It's a functioning agricultural operation. Water systems, grazing schedules, fencing routes, and pasture management all play a role. Every acre serves a purpose. Nothing sits unused. When housing development started spreading toward the rural parts of our county, I knew eventually somebody would look at my open land and see development opportunities instead of a working ranch. What I didn't expect was for that misunderstanding to arrive with a luxury swimming pool and a swim-up bar. The woman responsible was named Ranada. She moved into a newly built HOA community located directly beyond my eastern fence line about 18 months before everything happened. Within roughly 6 weeks of moving in, she somehow became HOA president. I still don't know exactly how she pulled that off, but several neighbors later described her leadership style using words like steamroller. More than one person told me nobody wanted to challenge her. Ranada had opinions about absolutely everything. She complained that my cattle were too visible from the community walking paths. She complained about ranch odors. She complained about the appearance of my fencing, and even submitted a formal HOA request suggesting I install decorative panels to improve what she called the neighborhood's visual appeal. I did not install decorative panels. What I did was ignore her. For a while, that seemed like the best option. People who run ranches don't have spare time for unnecessary arguments. My days were already filled with repairing fences, caring for livestock, and dealing with a dry season that forced me to haul supplemental water across the property multiple times every week. For months, Ranada was little more than background noise. Then she stopped being background noise. The first sign of trouble appeared when I noticed construction equipment near the eastern boundary. At first, I assumed the machinery was working on her property. The terrain along that fence line dips into a shallow drainage area, and from a distance, everything appeared to be positioned beyond my land. On a Tuesday afternoon, I drove out to take a closer look. The moment I arrived, something felt wrong. The excavator wasn't beyond my fence. It was beyond my fence and nearly 40 feet inside my pasture. I stepped out of my truck and walked the area myself. Survey stakes, orange marker flags, string lines, the early stages of a major pool excavation. All of it sitting on agricultural land that belonged to me. I returned to my truck and called my attorney, Dominic, before I even started the engine, and I stayed calm. Years ago, I learned a lesson the hard way. The second you stop being the reasonable person in a dispute is usually the second you begin losing control of it. Now here's where the situation becomes complicated. Ranada had actually obtained permits. She had submitted plans. The HOA Architectural Committee had approved the project. The one thing she apparently never bothered to confirm was exactly where her property ended and mine began. Remember that detail, because it matters later. Within 48 hours, Dominic sent a certified cease and desist notice. Ranada received it on a Thursday morning. Construction resumed Thursday afternoon. I watched from inside my truck parked on my ranch access road. My phone camera was recording everything with a visible timestamp running in the corner. As I sat there watching the crews continue digging, I felt something that surprised me. Not anger, not frustration. Patience. The kind of patience ranchers develop after years of handling livestock. Because when you spend enough time around animals, you learn something important. The most dangerous creature in any pasture is usually the one that has no idea it's already trapped. Renata didn't keep her opinion of me to herself. She told neighboring ranchers that I was being unreasonable and stubborn. According to her, I simply didn't appreciate the value her project would bring to the surrounding area. She described me as an obstacle that would eventually come around once I realized how beneficial her luxury addition would be. She repeated the same story to the HOA board. Then she instructed her contractor to continue construction, and I let her, not because I approved of it, but because Dominic had already commissioned an independent boundary survey. The results were scheduled to arrive the following Wednesday, and I preferred facts over arguments. When the survey report finally arrived, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the paperwork for several minutes before making a single phone call. The findings couldn't have been clearer. The entire project sat on my land. Every part of it, the excavation, the planned deck, the equipment storage area, all of it. There was no overlap, no confusion, and no gray area that anyone could debate. The development's legal boundary stopped exactly at the fence line, precisely where my grandfather's original records said it stopped. Renata hadn't accidentally crossed the property corner. She had built a $140,000 swimming pool nearly 40 feet inside my pasture. Dominic filed the survey documentation with the county that same afternoon. Now, ask yourself a question, because this is a point where everything changed. What would you do if somebody spent $140,000 constructing a permanent feature on your property without permission? Most people would have several options. So, did I? I simply chose the option that made the most sense for a cattle ranch. As expected, Renata hired an attorney. His name was Fletcher. He showed up to every meeting dressed in a sport coat and spoke at a speed that suggested he hoped nobody would have enough time to challenge what he was saying. Fletcher argued that the project had been completed in good faith. He argued that forcing removal would be excessive. He argued that I should agree to a retroactive easement and accept financial compensation in exchange for allowing the pool to remain where it was. Dominic disagreed. He pointed directly to our state's agricultural property laws and explained that any permanent structure built on deeded ranch land without the owner's authorization could legally become part of that property. More importantly, the choice of remedy belonged entirely to the landowner. Then Dominic introduced a document that effectively ended the discussion. My family's original deed contained a rarely used agricultural use covenant that had remained attached to the property for decades. The language dated back to 1967. Under that covenant, any structure placed on a ranch could be incorporated into active agricultural operations if the owner elected to exercise that right. Neither Fletcher nor the HOA board had ever encountered anything like it. Honestly, neither had most people in the room. I exercised the right immediately. The first connection work began on a Friday evening. By sunrise Saturday morning, Renata's luxury pool had become part of my ranch infrastructure. A professionally installed water line connected the entire system to my livestock watering network. Everything was permitted, everything was inspected, everything was legal, and everything worked exactly as intended. Over 300 Angus cattle suddenly had access to what was easily the cleanest and most expensive watering station in the entire county. To make things even better, I incorporated part of the surrounding deck area into a new rotational paddock system. The HOA sent additional legal notices. Dominic answered every one of them. Renata's response was much simpler. 11 days later, she listed her house for sale. To this day, I still move cattle past that pool on a regular basis. And every time I do, I think about my grandfather carrying that folded survey in his shirt pocket year after year. He understood something that a lot of people forget. Records matter. Boundaries matter. Documentation matters. When everything is properly recorded, preserved, and backed by the law, the paperwork usually wins in the end, every single time. If you enjoyed this story and it reminded you why property rights should never be taken lightly, make sure you subscribe for more HOA Revenge stories just like this one. And don't forget to leave your country in the comments. I'd love to see where everyone is watching from around the world.